Welcome to the Full Nielsen. Have you guys ever been in a situation in which you had a bunch of products to choose from and you couldn't make up your mind about which one you wanted? Well, I recently found myself in that situation as I was shopping for a new gaming mouse, and I just decided to buy them all. So today I'm going to be doing a comparison video for you guys and give you guys some insight into the differences between these different mice and hopefully help you be able to make a more informed purchasing decision yourselves. Now, for the condensed version of this review, I'm going to say right off the bat that every single one of these mice are great. They all feature the same PMW3366 sensor, which is just awesome. I found even on a surface that's not a perfect surface or a semi-dirty or anything like that, that they still track exceptionally well. So I'm really impressed with each one of these, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend any one of them. It really just comes down to your personal preference, the features you're looking for, and then the price you want to pay for the mouse. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the differences, and I'm going to begin with the weight. The Logitech Gpro weighs 83 grams. The Logitech G502 weighs 121 grams. The Logitech G403 weighs 107 grams, and the Logitech G900 also weighs 107 grams. Now this is the wireless version of the 403, and that's without the weight in it, that it weighs 107 grams. Now, does the weight really make a big difference? Some of you guys out there are probably like me, who have no idea whether or not the weight really makes a difference because you just go out and buy one mouse and that's all you ever use and you don't know anything any different. So me having had the opportunity to play with all of these mice extensively has given me a great deal of insight into that, and I want to say that yes, it does make a difference, and from what I found in some games such as Counter-Strike, it makes a very big difference. I found that with the Logitech G Pro I played way better in games like Counter-Strike because of the weight and how fast it is. And it's so lightweight that it feels like there's no disconnect between your movement that you're doing and what's happening on screen. It feels like you're looking, you're thinking, and you're reacting, and it's just happening. It's an interesting experience, to say the least. It's something I never experienced before with my old gaming mouse, which is this Logitech G700s. By the way, I do not recommend this mouse. It is outdated. It is way heavier than any of the rest of these. The buttons aren't as good. The sensor is not as good. Don't buy the G700s. All the rest of these are way better. But so going from this G700s, which was a beast of a mouse, super heavy, to trying all these different mice, and eventually the G Pro here, the G Pro's weight makes a huge difference in first-person shooters. Now, if you play first-person shooters and RPGs and a bunch of other games, I don't necessarily think these mice are going to hold you back a great deal. And I'll get into that a little bit later when I talk about the performance and how they perform for me. But for me, the weight did make a significant difference in first-person shooters. So as far as the weight's concerned, the Logitech G Pro is by far the winner here when compared to the rest of these. Now, the buttons on all of these mice are great. They all have the same feel. They're all really tactile. They all feel like they take roughly the same amount of pressure. Really, the only difference in the buttons is going to come down to the layout of the buttons and some of the different buttons that some of these mice feature that other mice don't feature. Now, the only two mice here that have an infinite scroll wheel are the Logitech G900 and the G502. So if you need an infinite scroll wheel, and for those of you who don't know what that is or have never seen that feature on a mouse, you press this button here and it unlocks the mouse wheel, and then you can spin it and it just scrolls super fast infinitely. And I really like this feature. It was on my old G700s, and I really like that feature. So if you decide you have to have that feature, then you're going to want to go with the G900 or the G502 for an infinite scroll wheel. These mice are also the only two mice on the table here that have the ability to scroll side to side with the mouse wheel. So if that's important to you, that's another reason why you may want the G900 or the G502 over the 403 of the Logitech G Pro. Now, in terms of the rest of the layout, the G900 features two DPI buttons right here that allow you to adjust the DPI settings on the fly with your mouse. I don't like where those are placed for gaming. On my old G700s, they're placed clear up here at the front. these are the two that I use for my DPI, and I really like that because I could just go up or go down or up and fire at the same time, and I really like the placement of those. So I don't like the placement of them here, because if you have your normal grip to try to reach back here and adjust the DPI and not bump the infinite scroll button or any of that, it's just a mess. So I don't like these DPI buttons. In fact, I think they're totally useless in my opinion. So what I did is I rebound on my test of all of the rest of these mice, because most of them don't feature button placement like my old G700 had. I switched my DPMI buttons to these two buttons. Now some of you probably don't care about adjusting your DPI on the fly, but I use it in a lot of games. Not in Counter-Strike and stuff like that so much, but in games like Battlefield, I find it really comes in handy when I'm sniping at really long distances, or then when I'm up close or medium range. I usually run 3 DPI settings on my mouse. So, I don't mind the layout of the side buttons on this mouse, never accidentally clicked them, don't mind them at all in the G900. I don't really care for these two buttons. I really like the infinite scroll wheel. In my opinion, it's better than it is on the 502 because it feels a little bit more tactile and it has rubber surface on it, which is really nice. So that's my impressions of the G900, and that's the layout of the buttons on the G900. It is also the only mouse here that is truly ambidextrous, because you can take these buttons off and swap them to the opposite side. You actually get 2 sets of buttons, or you can run sets of buttons on both sides of your mouse if you wanted to do that. But this can be switched to a truly ambidextrous left-handed mouse, while none of the rest of these feature that ability. In fact, the G403 and the G502 have a shape that is basically a right-handed shape only, whereas the Logitech Gpro could be used left-handed in terms of the shape, but because of the buttons being where they are on this side, you may accidentally press them if you were to use it left-handed. I don't know, maybe not. They're kind of small. It's not really bothering me. So, but anyway, moving on. The G403 features, it just has a scroll wheel, no infinite scroll here. It has a DPI button here that you can use to change the DPI. If you're only going to toggle between 2 different DPI settings, you may like going back and forth on this, but since I use 3, that's not even an option. I'm not going to go through all 3. I just want to go up or down, so I use the side. It has the scroll wheel. Scroll wheel feels great. It does not allow you to scroll from side to side the way the G502 or the G900 allow you to. So it's just a plain Jane basic scroll wheel, 2 buttons on the side, these 2 mouse buttons, and your DPI button here. Now the G502 here has the infinite scroll feature I already pointed out. It has these 2 buttons up here, which, as I mentioned, I said earlier, I really like those on my G700, and I would use those for my DPI settings because I really like the placement of them when I was playing games to change my DPI settings fast. So how do I feel about them on the 502? I do not like the placement of these buttons on the 502, and if I were going to use rebind my DPI buttons, I would use probably the side buttons, or I would make myself put up with only 2 DPI settings and actually use the sniper button here. The reason I don't like the placement of these is because I have pretty large hands. I wear an extra large size glove, and to press this rear button, the buttons are so much longer than they were on my G700s that I really have to move my finger back quite a ways. It's almost as far back as you'd have to move it to press the DPI button over here. So that's the reason why I don't really like the location of that. I suppose you could also rebind the DPI setting to just this front one and toggle between a couple settings, and that wouldn't be bad either. I probably actually really like that, even more than the sniper button. But anyway, so on the G502, we have these 2 buttons here. Then we also have 2 more buttons on the side. Then we have the DPI sniper button right here. And then you have, I believe this would probably be your, you could use this DPI button, but I think this is probably the button that you would use to change through your different profiles. Your infinite scroll button here that unlocks things. Sorry, I think I had you guys out of frame as I was showing all that stuff. You have the 2 buttons here, 2 buttons here, sniper button here. Then you have your infinite scroll wheel unlocked, and then your profile button right there. And the Logitech Gpro is really plain, just 2 buttons on the side, 2 buttons here. Your mouse wheel, which is just a plain mouse wheel, and then you can use this. It's set by default as a DPI button, but as I mentioned, I rebound all of these to the side buttons for my DPI settings. So that's the button layout for each of these mice, and that's going to come down to personal preference. What do you like? Do you want your sniper button here on the left-hand side for your thumb? You know, do you even change your DPI when you're messing with any of that stuff? Do you want a simpler mouse? Do you need more buttons for a MOBA? If that's the case, this one probably has the best layout. Not a MOBA, sorry, MMO or something like that. You're probably going to want the G502 if that's the case, because it probably has the best layout for that, whereas the Logitech G900, because the buttons, you have two here, but you can only put the other two on the opposite side, that's going to be really clunky to try to use buttons on both sides at the same time. And I don't think they designed it with that in mind. They designed it so if you were left or right-handed, you could just put two on the one side or the other and leave the other side blank. So anyway, that's the layout of the buttons. For you guys, that's going to come down to personal preference of what it is you guys like and what it is you want out of a mouse. Now the skids on all of these mice. If you guys don't know what skids are, that are these little plastic feet they put on your mouse that allow it to slide on your mouse pad or whatever surface you're playing on. I found that the skids on all of these mice are great. I didn't have any issues with any of them. The Logitech Gpro has really simple itty-bitty skids, but I never found that to be an issue for me. The surface I play on is a hard plastic table. I use no mouse pad because I don't like having to stick to a mouse pad, and I know you can get way bigger mouse pads, but I also really like the surface of just my plain plastic table because it's super slick, and I really prefer that. So I didn't find that even the G Pro with the smaller skids was an issue for me. Maybe on a mouse pad it would be more of an issue, but the rest of these have pretty good size skids on them, so you're not going to have any issue from what I saw with too much friction on your mouse pad because of the skids. Now, the shape. This is another thing that is going to be totally personal preference, and if you have the opportunity to use, you know, your friend's mouse for a while, you can swap mouse with somebody that has, or swap mice with your neighbor or somebody that has a different mouse than you, and try out a variety of different mice so that you can get an idea of what shape you prefer. I highly recommend that. I am really into firearms and different things, and the best way I could describe the shape of a mouse is kind of like the shape of a handgun or the pull of a trigger on a firearm, which is, it is personal preference and it's really unique, and it makes a world of difference getting a mouse that fits you if you are trying to be competitive in an FPS game or something like that. So for me, I'm coming from the G700, which has this really right-handed contour. It sloped from left to right quite severely, caused me wrist pain and stuff like that. None of the rest of these caused me any pain at all. They're far better shape. With that being said, this is a right-hand shape only, and it is not what's considered a neutral shape. So my understanding of what a neutral shape is almost like an ambidextrous shape. It doesn't have any really severe slants from left to right or slopes or angles or anything like that. And the two mice on this table that are somewhat neutral are the G900 and the Logitech G Pro. And then the two that are shaped with that left to right shape to some degree, which as you can see when you compare it to this mouse, well, to me there's a world of difference as far as the feel in hand. This one has, it's just too much, it's bad. Anyway, but the G403 has a slight shape from left to right, slight slope to it, and it also has a shape in here in which you can see that it's slightly contoured. You know, I think they think that's better for a right-handed person, and on the outside it's slightly sloped this direction. So on the Logitech G502, it has a similar shape to the G403. It's kind of hidden with the buttons and stuff, but it is sloped, as you can see, from left to right, sloping downward, and it has similar contour as far as your thumb and stuff like that. Anyway, so that should give you guys an idea, a rough idea of what the shape is like. The Logitech G Pro is an extremely flat mouse, and it has a very neutral shape. And from having used all of these mice, for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to, and you have hands that are about the same size as mine, I found that I prefer a neutral shape. It made a world of difference for me. I performed way better with a neutral shape, And I have used a mouse that does not have a neutral shape for a very long time in the G700, and I finally figured out what the difference is for me. And when I was playing Counter-Strike, I noticed that when I take a mouse like this, or the Logitech G502 here, or the G700, that when I put my hand on the mouse and I'm holding the mouse like I would hold it straight, that just because of the natural contour of the mouse, I naturally want to take the mouse and twist it. So this is the way I'd hold this mouse. This is the way it feels best in hand, and look at how crooked it is. Now when I would take, this mouse, I would do, actually the G502 doesn't feel quite as bad as the 403 in terms of how bad I would try to can it. But anyway, any mouse like that that has a non-neutral shape or a slope like that that's meant for right-handed, I found that I automatically twist the mouse slightly to the left. And I found that that messes with my tracking when I'm trying, because when I'm trying to, quick scope somebody or something like that, or do some sort of flick shot or get on target really fast, or switch from target to target, that I'm not just moving the mouse directly left or right, I'm actually moving it slightly upward or downward because of the way I am canting the mouse. And I did not have that issue with the G900 or the Logitech Gpro. Both of them I could just grab onto, and it felt totally natural. When I would go to aim at somebody, I could just point right on them and had no issue at all. Now, I did run identical DPI settings on all of these mice in all of the games that I played. And whenever I switched the DPI settings, I always made sure that I switched it equally on any of the mouse when I would do any of the mice when I would do any of my testing. So that wasn't a factor at all. Now, so for the shape, I prefer a neutral shape, and out of all of these mice, even with my gigantic hands, I prefer the Logitech G Pro's mouse shape. Even though it's the smallest mouse here, I just really like the shape of that mouse, and that combined with the weight, it just performed really well for me, which I'll get to here towards the end. Now, performance, as I mentioned earlier, the sensors in them are exceptional. I wouldn't hesitate to recommend any of these mice. It really comes down to personal preference and what it is that you guys want in a mouse. But performance for me, in terms of which one of these did I perform the best with, it was by far the Logitech G Pro. And second was the Logitech G900, and I think that was the shape more than anything. It was just the shape. And the G Pro, it was the shape combined with the weight. And to me, that's what I would chalk up the performance difference. Now, the price of these mice, I paid $53 for the G Pro, around $53 for the G502, and around $53 for the wireless version of the G403, which is a really good price. And then with the G900, I paid $122. Now, you're typically going to see the G403 wireless version around $70, and this is probably still going to be around $120. These two, and this is something Logitech isn't really touting, but I'm going to tell you guys this, that if you look on their specs on their website, the G700 even, the G900, and the G403 all have the same wireless performance in terms of their response time, which is 1 millisecond. Which meant for me, I didn't notice any difference between wired or wireless versions of these mice, or running these mice in wired or wireless mode. They ran super well either way, no difference. And I never noticed that with my G700. It was just the sensor. When things would get dirty on the table, it caused me issues and stuff like that. And it just didn't seem like it was as smooth or as fast or anything as these other mice. So that's the price you're typically going to probably be looking at for these. So the question is the G900 really worth it in terms of wireless? Well, you'll have to decide in terms of the shape. But for me, I'd never pay $122 for a mouse like this under normal circumstances, and especially after having tested these, this is not worth it, in my opinion. This should be around $70 to $80. This mouse should be around, $50, and these two should probably be around the $45 range, $40 range, in my opinion. Now, but you're going to have to decide, based off the features you want, what represents the best value and stuff like that for you. I have heard that people were buying these around Black Friday for in the $70 to $80 range. And if you could pick one up for that price, then I would say the Infinite Scroll Wheel may be worth, you know, the extra money for you and stuff like that over like the 403. And the shape for me is a big deal. I would probably pay $20 price difference between these two mice just for the shape. But I'm not going to pay a $40 or $50 price difference. That's just ridiculous. Especially when I get to my final verdict here of as far as which one of these mice I like the best. And that is actually, and this really surprised me because I wanted to like a lot of these other ones more. They have more features, they have more buttons, they might look cooler, whatever. But the mouse that I perform by far the best with, and is the best mouse here in my opinion, at least for my personal preference and stuff like that, and which one I perform the best with, is the Logitech Gpro. This mouse for me just performed incredible. It was amazing for me to see the difference when I play a game like Counter-Strike. I was hitting like 50% more of my shots than I was with any of these other mice. It was that noticeable. Well, not any of these other mice, more than these two mice because of the shape. And then with this mouse, it was probably, I don't know, maybe 20% to 15% hitting more of my shots than with this mouse. And that's just because I could move the mouse so rapidly and get on target so quick and switch from target to target so quickly. The Logitech G Pro, in my opinion, just really takes the cake here. And this is coming from somebody who wears extra large gloves. I have pretty big hands, and even with big hands, this smaller mouse, it still, to me, was plenty comfortable. It's not as comfortable, in my opinion, as the 403, but it didn't cause me any pain or anything like that at all. And I actually found that I think using more of my fingertips to play probably helped contribute to my performance, whereas this one fills my hand more, which contributes to the comfort, but I think actually hinders my performance. So for me, the G403 is plenty, or the G Pro is plenty comfortable. It's super lightweight, and with that awesome sensor that all of these mice feature, it is my #1 pick for me personally. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, it's going to come down to personal preference and what features you guys want and how much money you want to spend. Each of you guys have got to decide that for yourselves. If you have the opportunity to try a bunch of them out, that's the best way to go. Because that way you can actually sit down and play numerous matches and compare them side by side with similar DPI settings and decide for yourselves which one you like the best. So that concludes my review for you guys. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to send me a message or post any of that in the comment section below. And thanks for watching. Have a nice day.